Hi, this is Charles Kelly, Money Tips. Right, okay, let's ask you a question today. Has George Osborne's tax hike killed off the buy-to-let market? Now, a few years ago, we warned the government, we warned the ministers and the then Chancellor, George multimillionaire Osborne, now six jobs Osborne, that this would affect the market and that landlords would pull out of the market when he took away a number of tax benefits, which I'll go through in a second. And now we are seeing what's happening in this year with 1 in 4 landlords thinking about or planning to sell their buy-to-let properties in the next 12 months in 2020. So that is what's happening due to these tax changes, which are now only just starting to bite, in fact, because the tax relief on mortgage interest has been phased out over a 3 or 4 year period. And from this April, a lot of especially higher rate taxpayers are going to feel the pinch. Don't forget, they also removed the 10% wear and tear allowance, which effectively gave you a 10% discount on your tax bill. And this was very helpful, where it basically meant that on furnished lettings that you're able to claim a discount of wear and tear on your furniture, rather than claiming for this and that. You just had a 10% wear and tear allowance, which worked quite well, and that's been taken away as well. So we're already paying higher rates of tax if we had further furnished lettings. And don't forget, this is some of you might be saying, well, so what? Buy-to-let landlords, they're just taking properties away from first-time buyers. Well, I don't really believe that's true. Buy-to-let landlords are providing a service, and there are 2 million buy-to-let landlords, and if 1 in 4 of them sell their properties this year, that's 500,000 properties that are going to come off the market. Okay, they could be sold to bigger landlords who are prepared to carry on in the market, but a lot of them might come off the market, and that's going to push up rents for other renters that want to rent a property, and there'll be a bit of a shortage because there'll be less properties around. So, and thanks to Bunty there, who agrees. You see these programs on TV, rogue landlords and that sort of thing. Yeah, there are a few rogue landlords, but 99% of them are not like that. They want to run a business, and in a business, if you go out and start a business and you borrow money from the bank, then the interest on that loan is offset against your turnover, and it's off. So it reduces your taxable profit, and that's what was happening with buy-to-let. Now that has been changed. It's a fundamental change. Now this doesn't apply to properties in limited companies, but not everyone can just go and switch their property from sole ownership to limited company without incurring taxes. So George Osborne has not really done us any favours. And he's hit middle England, really, the people that are going out there trying to do something to get a decent pension. Because let's face it, pensions and pensions laws and pensions legislation and rules and confusing rules have become a mess. The government has got to sort this out. They've got to sort out pensions, because there's such a lot of confusion around pensions. And this goes back to Gordon Brown, in fact, when they started taxing pensions, taxing the funds within pensions. It was called a 5 billion hike on pension funds, where he just took money out of pensioners' pockets, basically, like a pickpocket, really. And since then, there's been so many changes to rules that even though I was a financial advisor for 25 years, I can barely understand what's been going on. Now they've introduced work-based pensions, but you're going to have to save a lot of money in these pensions to get a decent retirement. So a lot of people have said, well, all right, I'll buy property and I'll pay that mortgage off, and then in retirement I'll have a property which will give me an income. So they're basically getting off their butts and doing something about it themselves, not just saying, well, let the state take care of me and I'll claim benefits and that sort of thing. No, these are the people that the government should be encouraging: savers, investors. These are the people they need to encourage. So what's going to happen? Well, I'll give you an example of how the tax changes will affect you in April. And let's say you're an investor with a property, £300,000 property, and you borrowed, in the old days you could borrow 90%, £270,000 to buy this house on an interest-only mortgage, on a buy-to-let interest-only mortgage. This means that you pay the bank back let's say your rate is 4%, you'd pay the bank back £900 a month or £10,800 a year. Now that's your outgoings, and let's say your income is £1,250 a month or £15,000 a year. And until 2017, you only paid tax on the profit, so you would take the 15,000 and deduct the outgoing of 10,800. We're not assuming any other outgoing here, and you would pay tax on the difference. So this was simply the difference between your rental income and the mortgage interest, and that worked out at £4,200. So a 40% taxpayer would pay 40% of that, or £1,680 to HM Revenue and Customs, leaving them with a net profit of £2,500. Now in 2017, the government began slashing the proportion of mortgage interest on that you could deduct. Now this tax year it is just 25%, and from April the allowance will be axed altogether. So unlike under the new rules, you would pay tax on the entire £15,000 rental income, less a new 20% credit designed to offset some of the bill, the amount of the mortgage relief that you can claim has obviously steadily been decreasing. So working out your tax bill can seem fiddly, but let's look at it for a higher rate taxpayer. For a 40% taxpayer, this means that the taxpayer, the tax is £6,000. The credit is the same for everyone, 20% of the annual mortgage interest. So in this example, £2,160. Now take that sum away from the £6,000 and you're left with the final bill of £3,940. And that means that you add that to your £10,000 mortgage outgoing. So your outgoings are now £14,640, which is, what does that leave you with? £360 a year. So no wonder a lot of, now I know this is complicated to work out, but you need to see your accountant about this because it will start hitting you where it hurts. And it's no wonder that 1 in 4 of these landlords are thinking about just getting out of it altogether, because what's the point of going through all the aggravation when you're making £300 a year or £30 a month? And this is not a passive business, but letting properties is not passive. It might be semi-passive for somebody if it's managed, but even if it's managed, you're still involved, you're still getting the calls, you're still getting the emails from the agent saying, well, there's this repair to do, that repair to do, and you have to investigate it, you have to spend time on it, you have to get that tight feeling in your guts on a Friday night when they say the boiler's broken down and you can't get a plumber over the weekend, because they never tell you on a Thursday or a Wednesday, they tell you on a Friday. So this is really going to hit people, and this is why a lot of landlords are thinking about getting out. And obviously, as a basic rate taxpayer, you're not going to be so affected, but it's still going to have an effect on, according to the article I'm reading here, 1 in 4 landlords or 500,000 people. There are also going to be other tax changes for people that become accidental landlords or want to sell their property. There were capital gains allowances for people who couldn't sell their property and bought another one and rented out the property they've had. This is something you need to talk to your accountant about as well, because that tax is effectively almost going to double. So there you go. And also there was another report actually today from the BBC saying that there are now 230,000 less buy-to-let landlords than there were seven years ago. That's a lot of properties come off the market, and this is why, even though prices didn't go up much in the last year, rents seem to have crept up, and it doesn't help generation rent. What generation rent need is not just to kick the landlords in the nuts. What generation rent need is more social housing being built, proper social housing, not 20% of this development, 20% of that development. They need a lot more social housing and council housing built by councils to go out and say, right, we could borrow money from the government at very low interest rates, at very preferential low interest rates. We can build council houses. We can actually make money on it if they do it efficiently and not spend everything that the government spends on, like HS2, costs 10 times as much as a private person could do it. But if they can do it properly, they can actually make a return on their money and provide social housing at the same time, because many people are never going to be able to buy their own property. It was never the case that 100% of the people in this country bought their own property. That was never the case. So it's never going to be the case that everybody will be able to buy their own property. But in the past, there were a lot more council houses being built, and that provided people with that security of tenure, knowing that they've got a property, a tenancy for life, as it were. So that's what the government needs to do if they want to solve the housing crisis, is get these councils building more houses for your people. Don't just rely on private developers to throw a bit of social housing your way, because a lot of these schemes don't work. There are a lot of luxury properties where they give a bit of social housing and it's or affordable housing, and it's unaffordable, or they commute this affordable housing allowance into a sum of money and give it to the council in the form of Section 106 money, and they give out social community infrastructure money, SIL money. But the councils will find it very hard to spend this money. And what will happen in the end is the council will spend it on vanity projects, will be a waste of time. So I think the government have got to really get things going. We need new cities. We need new Milton Keynes. We need new towns, new Basildons, new Harlows, and that's built on rail lines, built with transport infrastructure, not places put in the middle of nowhere where people have to drive to them. And we need some bold plans to solve this problem. So if you're a landlord that is suffering this problem, I think what you need to do is speak to your accountant, see if it's worth it. I know that a lot of owners like myself have cut back. They've said, right, well, rather than keep expanding and keep borrowing, we're going to sell and reduce borrowing so they're not so exposed to these tax hikes that 6 jobs George Osborne laid on us a few years ago. He's okay. He's got his multi-millions family fortune. I understand some of that was even offshore. So these guys are okay. They know what to do long before the law is passed. The rest of us down here, we're the ones struggling. We're in the middle there. We're not at the top. We're not at the bottom. We're in the middle. We're struggling every day. So I don't think he's done any favours whatsoever. But the problem is the government need this money. They're not going to give it back now. That's it. It's gone forever, I think, because the government basically spends more than it earns. Every year they have to borrow money. So they're not going to be able to give this money back anytime soon. And I mean, there's another statistic for you. Do you know how many people are working in this country? I think it's 35 million people, actually working population in a country of, say, 60 million. Now, do you know how many people actually claim benefits of some sort? I'm including benefits in retirement and that sort of thing. Do you know how many people claim those benefits? 20 million. So that's 2/3 of the people in this country are on some sort of state payout, state handout, which, okay, you might not call pensions and that sort of benefits, but they're still paid for by the state. They're still paid for by the taxpayer. So the 30 odd million people who are working have got to, before anything else is spent on, they've got to pay some of that money out to people who are not working or are in retirement. Is that sustainable? Well, of course it's not sustainable. I think at least 7 million people are claiming some sort of unemployment benefit, sickness benefit, long-term sickness, and then the other 13 million are in retirement because there's no retirement fund. It's all paid for by taxpayers. So you pay your tax, and that out of that tax they've got to pay the people who are not even working. That's before they've fixed the potholes in the road and put more police on the beat so that we're all safer. And that's before we've paid off the national debt and all that sort of thing. It's all got to be paid out to people who are not contributing to anything at the moment to society. I know people who've retired have contributed in the past, but a lot of those would have not even earned enough money in their lifetime to pay enough tax to fund their pension for the rest of their life, because 50 years ago, 60 years ago, they didn't work it out properly. They cocked up. They didn't realise that people would live 20, 30 years into retirement. So they've really screwed up on this. So therefore, they're not going to be able to give this tax back to landlords. So forget about it. You have to make other plans. One of the things you can do if you're buying properties in the future is to buy them in limited companies. But even there, you can be caught by higher interest rates that you pay on limited company mortgages, because most of the lenders in the high street will not lend to limited companies. Hello, what are they thinking about? I don't know. If you go into the average high street bank, say, I'm a limited company, oh no, we don't do those. Why not? I'm surely every new buy-to-let investor is buying through a limited company, aren't they? Well, if they're not, they're going to lose out on valuable tax benefits in the future. So there you go. I've had my little rant there about what George Osborne did to us a few years ago, and I think it will end in tears in some way. I don't know what's going to happen really. Let's see. But maybe if you're thinking about investing in property, there are going to be some properties coming on the market from what we might call distressed landlords this year. But if you are thinking about getting into property, now more than ever, you need to learn how to do it properly. You really do need to learn how to do it properly. Don't just go out there and buy a buy-to-let property or a flat or a house in multiple occupation. Make sure you understand what you're doing and understand the rules, because things have changed. A lot of rules have changed. Tenants Acts, Tenants Fees Act came into force. Most letting agents haven't got a clue. They don't even know what's going on with all these changes. Some of them, they don't even go to landlords meetings to find out what the latest changes are. So learn how to do it. If you're interested in a free taster course, let me know. Just drop me a line, charles@charleskelly.net, or on Facebook, on Messenger here, and I'll put you onto a course where you can at least learn and know what you're doing, rather than just jumping into the market and getting into property but without knowing what, because that could be a big disaster for you. You've got to know how to buy, where to buy, when to buy, what sort of mortgage you should be getting, whether you should be setting that up in a limited company, in the corporate company, what type of company you need, whether your strategy is going to be houses in multiple occupation, HMOs, or are you thinking about service accommodation? Again, different rules, different tax treatment even. Maybe you need planning for that. Are you thinking about doing your own developments, small developments, buy, sell, buy and refurbish? Would you like to buy properties but you haven't got any money? Can you do it with no money down? Can you own and control properties without using your own money? Well, the answer is yes. How do you do that? If you've got no money whatsoever, could you do rent to rent as a strategy? There are loads of strategies you can do out there. So I think the answer is to find out how to do it properly and then go out and invest your money, because that could, just a one-day taster course could save you a lot of money. Now, there's some courses coming up in the very near future, so let me know so we can get you a free ticket for that and get you started in property, because don't rely on state pensions. If they're already paying out state pensions to 13 million people today, based on a working population of 30 odd million, is it sustainable? Of course it's not sustainable. Something will have to give, and they're already pushing back the state retirement age. Now I thought I'd be retiring at 65. It looks like I'll be retiring at 67. In France, they can retire at 57. Some workers, state workers, 57. Now they want to push that back. They're on strike, aren't they? They've had a national strike. They're rioting. In France, people know how to demonstrate. Here, we write to our MP, or we complain on the bus, or we send a letter into the Times. I'm very angry about this. In France, they organise national strikes and bring the country to a standstill. What I'm saying is, in parts of Europe, they've got much better pension arrangements than us. But who's going to pay for all that? Falling birth rates. I can't see how France, Italy and Germany will be able to pay for these exorbitant pensions, allowing people to work in France 35 hours a week or something. Is it 30 or 35 hours a week they work? And then they can retire at 57. And then what, they're going to live to 87? So they might have, 35 years of work and then another 30 years in retirement. It doesn't make sense. You can't, they can't provide for that. It doesn't make sense. The tax you pay in your lifetime is it paying for everything else that you need during that lifetime. It's not enough to provide you with 30 years in retirement on an index-linked gold-plated pension that they're giving out in France. That's why they're bringing in these reforms like we have. So what I'm saying to you is I'm not going to be relying on state pension, because I don't know what sort of state pension I'll get when I retire. It certainly won't be enough to live on. So I have to do something in the meantime, and that's why I like property. I like property because you can borrow money to buy property. You can use what's called leverage. You know what leverage is, right? When you're trying to lift a big rock with your hand, you can't do it. But if you use a long lever, as the ancient Greeks found out, if you use a long lever, you can lift that rock without too much effort, right? The longer the lever. So in terms of borrowing money, that's called leverage, because it enables you, it gives you that leg up, that leverage that help to be able to buy a property using other people's money. And you can't borrow money to put into your state pension linked to or your work-based pension linked to the stock market because it's too risky. But you can borrow money to buy property, and you can make a profit on that property even after you pay the borrowing back. So there you go. Think about that. Think about the course you could do to learn how to get into property and maybe make yourself financially free in the next 5 to 10 years, so that you're not then worried about what kind of state pension you're going to get when the money has run out and the well has run dry. So thanks for listening. This is Charles Kelly bringing you money tips to help you save, earn, invest, accumulate and enjoy more money. Thanks for tuning in and listening on my podcast on iTunes and Stitcher, but also on Facebook Live. Hi, Bunty, Connor and everyone tuned in there. Thanks very much, and I will speak to you again soon. Bye for now.